Hi guys, I'm Miss Ryan.
And I'm Miss Seal. We're going to talk to you about tense shift in your writing today.
Okay, so what are we talking about when we say tense shift? Let's start by defining tense. Tense determines the physical form of a verb. In English grammar, we're working with two tenses, present and past. So, as an example, in the present tense, we would say she cries or she is crying. In the past tense, we would say she cried. Here's another example. Present tense, he runs for the ball. Past tense, he ran for the ball.
Now that we know what tense is, we need to figure out what tense shift is. A tense shift occurs when the verb changes from past to present, or vice versa, when it shouldn't. Some examples of when tense shift commonly occurs are when the student has lost sight of what tense they are telling their story in and switches between both verb tenses, even though the story is supposed to continue during a set time. This leads to confusion for the reader because it can be hard to know in which verb tense the author really wants the story to be heard. Another example is when the student shifts the tense of the verb from past to present, vice versa, or another combination during the narration in an attempt to provide complexity to his or her writing. This can happen with one sentence that contains multiple verbs or over a series of sentences. It is important that the tense remains the same throughout the narration in order to keep it consistent for the reader. The author needs to establish a setting, which includes a time in which the story occurs, and the tense of the verbs used by the narrator help keep the setting consistent.
So, why does tense matter? As the examples that we gave on the previous slide demonstrated, we need to make sure we aren't confusing our readers. Avoiding tense shift helps the reader understand the point in time in which the author is writing. When there are multiple verb tenses in one short amount of text that is not a flashback or flash forward, it can be hard for the reader to remember what time the story should be taking place in.
Now that we've defined tense shift, let's take a moment to look at this passage from Hatchet by Gary Paulsen. Take a minute to identify all the verbs in the passage. You can write them down on a piece of paper, or if you're projecting this on a whiteboard, you can circle the verbs. Now that you've identified all the verbs, can you spot the shift in tense? If you guessed slides, then you're right. If you look at the action in the rest of the passage, you will see that all of the verbs except for slides are in the past tense. When writing a narration, like Hatchet by Gary Paulsen, you want to keep all of your verbs in the same tense. This creates a consistent time frame for your narration that will be easy for your reader to understand. If the verb tense changes mid-narration, then your reader will likely become confused.
In this exercise, you'll need to choose which tense fits best. As you read the passage, you'll notice that we only gave you choices for 5 of the verbs. So use the other verbs in the passage as context to help you make the right decision. Pause the video and discuss with a partner which tense fits best. Did you guess right? What do you notice about the verbs that you had to choose? Well, they're all in past tense. The narrator uses past tense to recall a time in the past. Using the past tense conveys the time of the events to the reader. If you guessed the wrong tense on a few, take a minute to reread the passage with the correct tense. Does it make more sense? That's because keeping the tense consistent in the narration makes the story easier to understand.
In this quick activity, we'll read the story, then ask you to choose a sentence with the correct verb tense to finish the story. Johnny was walking home from school when it started to snow. He was really lucky he was wearing his snow boots. Then he thought to himself, Which one of the following best completes this sentence? If you guessed number 2, you're correct. It was snowing when Johnny was walking home from school. The text is being told from the past tense, telling about Johnny's experience walking home from school. His thoughts are in the present tense because Johnny was thinking them while he was walking home. So the best form of the verb keep is keeps.
Take a look at this passage from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Notice how the narration is in the past tense, but the dialogue stays in the present tense. We want to distinguish the differences in tense between narration and dialogue. So, the tense needs to stay consistent throughout the narration, even if it is different in the dialogue.
Now that you know how important it is to keep your tense consistent through your narration, we're going to look at a few reasons why authors choose to intentionally change the tense in their stories. These examples can be flashbacks, dreams, looking forward, change in the point of view of the narrator, and other reasons.
The last thing we're going to do is look at this passage from The Hunger Games. In the first paragraph, Katniss has a flashback. Take a minute and pause the video to look at the verbs in the first paragraph. They are all in the past tense.
Pause the video again and look at the second paragraph. In this second paragraph, you'll notice that Katniss alternates between present tense to represent her thoughts about the memory now and past tense when she brings up that memory.
Finally, in the last paragraph, Katniss returns to the present. Pause the video to read the last paragraph. You should notice that all of the verbs used in the last paragraph are in the present tense. Now that I've mapped out the tense usage in all 3 paragraphs, pause the video and discuss with someone close to you why the author would choose to have a shift in tense like this.
We hope you talked about how crucial that middle paragraph is to the narration. You should have noticed how it transitions the reader from past memory in the first paragraph to present reality in the third paragraph.
It's kind of like when you are dreaming right as your alarm goes off, and somehow the alarm becomes a part of the dream until you realize that it's actually your alarm going off in the present. The middle paragraph in the Hunger Games example is that moment between dream and reality. It mixes both tenses in a way that makes sense and prepares the reader to re-enter the present.
Another way authors use tense shift properly is by skipping the transitional paragraph altogether. If Suzanne Collins did this in The Hunger Games, it might have looked like this. Usually, when an author chooses to have a flashback without a transition, he or she will put the flashback in italics or offset it with a page break, as I did in this example. Again, using past tense for the flashback and present tense for the present allows the reader to understand the setting in the story.
Finally, one of the most recognizable examples of a flashback occurs in movies. In movies, filmmakers often choose to film the flashback with some kind of special effect. In the Hunger Games example, you could see that in the flashback part of the movie where Katniss is remembering a time where Peeta gave her some food, the scene is very dark. When the film returns to the present, where Katniss volunteers as tribute for her sister, the color of the scene is very different. It is bright and it looks like it is happening right now. Just like when we're writing and being mindful of tense shift, filmmakers need to be careful about how they choose to shift between flashbacks and the present.
Hopefully, we've shed some light on how to avoid tense shift when you're writing.
Thanks for sharing your time with us. If you want more grammar tips, check out more videos on the BSU Teacher YouTube channel.